Story 1. Driving across the country to a place I had never been, where I knew no one, right after my father died when I had no reason to stay. Changed everything. Story 2. 8 years ago, I spontaneously booked a one-way flight across the country with no job or accommodation lined up at the time of booking. However, everything fell into place after I purchased my plane ticket. I moved with just a suitcase and started my life over, and it has been the best life-changing decision I have ever made. I now live by the ocean and am working in my dream job. Story 3. I saved money to move to New York City to attend art school. Now, I have exhibited in galleries and museums. My artwork is in private collections, and I absolutely love what I do. Story 4. Decades ago, I moved to another country on my own for work. I had no college degree and barely spoke the language, but I did it. In hindsight, it was a huge risk. I was young and reckless. I wanted to truly live life and make the most of it. I'm not by any means successful or wealthy, but I'm glad I pursued my dreams. Most people, at the end of their lives, tend to regret the things they didn't do, not the things they did do. I leave you with this powerful quote from Confucius. We have two lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one. Story 5. Getting clean and sober was a challenging journey. I was using drugs to cope with and self-medicate my severe and, at the time, undiagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from a childhood of severe psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. The only way I could quiet the desire to commit suicide was through self-medication. I understood that there was a significant chance that without that resource, the thoughts telling me that dying would bring me the peace I never knew would eventually take over if I stopped. However, it reached a point where I had to take the risk and quit because I realized I couldn't continue down that path. That was almost a decade ago, and I am still clean and sober. Story 6. Moving 3 years ago changed my life entirely for the better. I moved to a smaller city, not far from family, but far enough that I don't get caught up in the old energy of a city with 1.5 million people. You really do forget what it's like to experience silence. I will never give that up again. Story 7. Moving out from my toxic household with not much money saved beyond a few months of rent and bills, and no job as a broke university student. Story 8. I just finished 4 years working remotely while traveling. It was a solo adventure with my dogs, exploring the United States and living out of small trailers. I visited 37 states and 20 national parks. What was meant to be a short-term commitment of 6 months turned into an extended journey until I was called back to the office last month. As a woman who had done road trips with my family as a child but had never towed a trailer, it was far outside my comfort zone. However, I believe I will always look back on those years as significant personal growth. It was a huge leap of faith for me to invest in upgrading my car, purchasing a trailer to tow, and ending my rental agreement within a 2-month period, all while unsure of how I would adapt to road life. It turns out that I truly loved it. Story 9. Working with at-risk youth, everyone told me I was wasting my time and that I would get assaulted. However, I have been doing it for 16 years now, and I am glad I took the risk even though I wish the compensation was better. Story 10. Quitting my 2 previous jobs. There were positive aspects to both. However, one was extremely challenging, and the other did not provide sufficient income. Story 11. Moved countries in 2021 at the age of 28. I found a job as a customer service representative within a month. I quit that job in early 2023 to study a front-end coding bootcamp and then a full-stack program due to the difficult job market at the age of 30. I extended my studies by completing a self-accelerated computer science degree from Western Governors University at the age of 31. This period was filled with anxiety, and if given a choice, I would certainly choose to approach it differently. However, 4 days before I turned 32, I received a job offer as a software developer. 3 months after joining, I have been performing exceptionally well. Not a day goes by that I don't feel a remarkable difference in my nervous system. Story 12. I bought a dental practice roughly 15 months after graduating from dental school. After purchasing the dental practice, 2 years later I bought a house and the building where my dental practice is located. At that point, I was $3 million in debt. It has worked out well. Story 13. Driving for Uber got me out of my comfort zone, helped me become skilled at talking to strangers, and provided a valuable second income when my spouse was laid off twice in 9 years. One of my passengers became my best friend over the last 7 years. Story 14. Abandoning my comfort and seeking discomfort introduced me to a whole new world. Without help, I can still build my empire myself. Story 15. I got a girl pregnant on either our first or second date. I didn't want kids, but I decided to give it a shot. The child took his mother's last name because I really didn't think it was going to work. However, I figured it was worth a try. He's turning 16 next month, has 2 brothers, and we have been married for 5 years now. Story 16. I moved as far away from my hometown as possible for college. I wanted to go to a place where no one knew me. Story 17. So I have 2 experiences to share. 1. I left my abusive ex, whom I had been with since high school. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. I traveled to a different state to meet my best friend from Reddit. Turned out fantastic, and I didn't get kidnapped. We still talk daily, and now I'm considering moving to his state. Story 18. I am reaching out to the guy I let go after a date. I have been married for over 4 years now and have a beautiful baby girl. Story 19. I left my manipulative ex, who was cheating on her husband, while still flirting with others. Story 20. Leaving my abusive ex and moving 12 hours away to completely restart my life was the best decision I have ever made. Story 21. Making friends with a girl is a challenge for me. I couldn't ask her out, but she remains friends with me despite my social struggles. Story 22. Leaving and completely cutting off my abusive, manipulative, and toxic family was a pivotal moment in my life. At 15 years old, I felt suffocated by them, completely brainwashed into believing that the world was a dangerous and hostile place. The only refuge and hope I had was in doing everything they told me to, sacrificing every ounce of freedom and self-respect. It was hard at first, and I faced unimaginable challenges, but I emerged not only stronger but also much happier. Story 23. Being brave enough to ask out my crush was a positive experience. We dated for 2 years, and I learned a lot from that relationship. Story 24. I transitioned from my previous job as a substitute teacher, where I earned approximately $9,000 per year. My position was stable because I was well-liked in the academic community. I then moved to a driving job with a salary of $20,000. I advanced in my career and now have an income in the 70,000s. Story 25. Quitting my job, starting a business, and failing taught me more in that short period of time than I could have imagined. Story 26. Moving away from my home state on a whim after a bad breakup. I had 2 to 3 days to decide and I went for it. It wasn't perfect at first, but after 3 years, I am finally getting to a place where I feel proud of myself again. Story 27. Moving abroad on my own at 20, I returned home sooner than I wanted due to the Brexit referendum, and I did not pursue the career I earned a bachelor's degree in, which was journalism. However, I am glad I experienced living abroad. It was a valuable experience that taught me independence and how to, at least somewhat, be an adult. Story 28. Joining the Army. I entered the Army without job skills and, after 6 years, left earning $150,000 per year in federal law enforcement, along with an additional tax-exempt $54,000 annually in Veterans Affairs benefits. The disability rating also exempts me from property taxes. I started as a human resources specialist and, after 2 years, transferred to a criminal investigations agent for 4 years. I was never deployed and worked only within the continental United States. Story 29. Going back to engineering school a second time, I realized that I am exhausting myself physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially to complete a degree in a system not designed for neurodivergent individuals with dyslexia. Story 30. Dating my ex-wife. We are splitting up after 16 years, but I do not regret it. She is one of my best friends and has become my close friend. We joked about being each other's cover when we were together. We are not in love anymore, but it was great while it lasted. We are planning a divorce party around our old anniversary in Las Vegas. where we got married and where I now live. Story 31. Breaking up with my ex was challenging. My friend, who did my hair at the time, held me accountable for making that decision. Story 32. Moving 2,000 miles away from home with the love of my life. Now married for 6 years and together for 10. We have 2 kids, 4 dogs, and my dream career in my home in the most beautiful place in the United States. It's pretty great. Story 33. Starting my own business was absolutely terrifying in the beginning, but it is the best thing I have ever done. Story 34. Moving far away from my hometown significantly changed my perspective. As a child and teenager, I often cried myself to sleep, feeling that I was born in the wrong place and didn't fit into my own life. After moving across the country, I felt better immediately. Story 35. Moving to Korea. I'm still not sure it's good in the long term, but I wouldn't trade my experiences for anything. Story 36. I am in the process of planning to move out of my abusive family home. I always thought it wasn't that bad and that people have it worse than I do. Even now, I am terrified and worried that I might be overthinking it, but maybe it isn't really that bad. I have a good support system that keeps reminding me I am making the right choice when I doubt myself. It is still hard to not feel like a burden to them, but I hope to improve on that. I am currently waiting for an email to schedule an interview for student accommodation, and I hope I pass the interview. Story 37. I took a gap year right after high school and got a part-time job while everyone else from my class went straight to universities and moved to new cities. I stayed with my parents. Everyone told me I was making a mistake and that my knowledge would go down the drain. I stayed back because of my then boyfriend, now fiancé, who went to military service. My parents didn't like the fact that I had adjusted my whole life around him. I was working and saving money while waiting for his return from service. When he came back about a year later, I had gathered decent starter funds for us and we moved in together. Now we both have university degrees and jobs, and we have been together for 12 years. I don't think we have ever been so in love and this happy together. I love him so much. Story 38. Uprooted my life and left my hometown, the only place I had ever lived, at nearly 40 to finally pursue a degree qualification. Story 39. I quit my full-time, well-paying job 2 summers ago. It was an incredibly toxic environment, so I moved back in with my parents and decided the commute wasn't worth it. I kept burning out, experiencing anxiety attacks at work, dealing with a sexist manager, and facing unappreciative owners. I don't miss it. I now have a part-time plant care job and am in a program where I get paid to run my own business. Story 40. 4 years without drinking and only having a drink again when I felt ready and with rules. Being comfortable setting and keeping boundaries, including ending friendships that no longer served me. Getting on a plane for the first time ever last year in my 40s. Story 41. Coming out to my wife has been a challenging experience. There is a statistic that states that 90% of marriages fail when one of the partners comes out as transgender. My masculinity fought its last stand in a fortress built upon that fact. However, one day, after a long struggle that reduced me to survival mode, I realized 2 important things. One was that I could, in fact, hold out another day and maintain my resolve until the end. The other realization was that long before that end could come, despite knowing that what I needed to maintain my defense would hasten that day, I would not be the kind of person who deserved to be married. From my wife's perspective, she would just see a rapid decline that I would not discuss for any reason. Looking at that same statistic again, I understood that it wasn't a 90% chance of catastrophe, but rather a 10% opportunity to escape the situation and possibly, somehow, learn to be true to myself. That conversation was the hardest and scariest thing I have ever done. This marked the beginning of a series of intense decisions that I would have trouble justifying, even now. How do you know whether hormone replacement therapy and its changes, many of which are irreversible, are right for you? I have an argument more comprehensive than one could believe, convincing any rational person that it is a terrible choice. However, I realized the only way to be certain was to try. It has been years. I didn't know where I was going or even why at first, but then one day I saw myself in the mirror and couldn't remember the last time I felt like myself. And I'm still married. It turns out that the initial statistic is partly because most people who marry under the assumption they are straight are not mistaken about that fact. My wife was. Story 42. Hitchhiking is an amazing way to meet a diverse range of people and travel for free. Visiting a nude beach opened up a plethora of unique places to feel free away from the hustle and bustle. Stealth camping involves finding a spot to watch the Milky Way without having to pay for a place to sleep, something that many dream of. Asking for unsold bread at the bakery made me realize how living for free is perfectly doable in the short term. Story 43. I quit my job. Instead of working for someone else, I took control of my life and started my own business. I will never work for another company again. Owning my life is an indescribable feeling. I can do anything I want. Vacation time no longer exists. If I want to go, I go. The only person I need to ask is my mom if she will watch my dog. She loves my dog. I worked for someone else for many years. Story 44. I quit a job that was draining the life out of me. I felt terrified at the time, but I have experienced relief and growth ever since. Story 45. Today, I did some car repairs myself that a mechanic wanted thousands of dollars for. I wasn't sure if I would make everything worse, but it turned out really well. Story 46. In 2010, I was in my mid-20s and had just started the long process of getting my life together. I had earned an associate degree in HVAC in 2008, but nobody was hiring. I had been bartending a few days a week and working as a part-time helper at a heating and cooling company for $8 an hour since then, but mostly I was partying and crashing at my parents' house. Out of a desire for independence, I applied and landed an apprenticeship with a local manufacturer known for good pay and 60-hour work weeks. Shortly after I started, my last great-grandparent died, and their house was to be auctioned as part of the estate. I spent a lot of time with my great-grandparents as a teenager. They were interesting people, and I was always looking for an excuse to visit. I would go for a drive with my one-hitter and then stop by to see if they needed anything done around the house. When auction day came, my mom asked if I was going to bid on the house. It seemed like an impossible idea at the time, but the more I thought about it, the better it seemed. I did some quick calculations and decided I would bid up to $70,000 and figure out the rest later. I won the auction at $63,000 and became a homeowner of a house built in the 1920s that needed everything. I started the decade-long process of first making it livable and then turning it into a home. I was working 55 hours a week, attending classes 6 hours a week, and constantly in the midst of a major DIY project for 4 years. I replaced the siding, updated all the plumbing, installed a new roof, sanded and finished the 1920s pine, removed a wall, upgraded the HVAC system, and installed a 200-amp electrical service, among other tasks. It feels like a fever dream, and I don't know how I did it, but what I do remember are moments of satisfaction and fulfillment. Biting off more than I could chew and navigating the challenges made me a different person. I gained confidence in my abilities as well as comfort in recognizing my limitations. Plus, I have a home and it's my home. Every room is filled with meaning. My daughter's bedroom is the same room where my great-grandpa used to hide quarters under the rug for me to find as a toddler. The marriage proposal to my wonderful wife is still painted on the wall of our bedroom, under glass and framed, through multiple changes in color and decor. It means the world to me. As an investment, I could sell it for 10 times what I paid at auction, based on recent sales in the area, but that's irrelevant. This isn't a starter home. It's a final home. I plan to live and die here. Story 47. Getting out of my shell and talking to people allowed me to meet most of my current and former closest friends. Moving out for university showed me independence and helped me create wonderful memories and meet great people. Story 48. I switched colleges to start a new major. I left the technical school, which was filled with individuals who peaked in high school and constantly told me how to act. I transferred to a different college where I met new people, my grades improved significantly, my attitude improved, and I almost entered a relationship. Story 49. I chose to cut contact with my parents. At first, it was scary, especially because of how I executed it. However, I feel happy that I made this decision. Story 50. Moving to Oakland. You hear a lot of negativity about the city, And while the drivers can be reckless, the people are incredibly friendly, the food is excellent, and the weather is perfect. Story 51. Putting trust into a long-distance relationship with someone I had only been dating for a year and a half. I sold my house and quit my long-term job to move closer to him. I moved in 2019. This summer will be our 2-year wedding anniversary. Story 52. As a 22-year-old autistic, socially timid, and immature young adult with a stutter, I took a job at a Delta Airlines call center to learn how to interact with people better. I ended up staying there for 6 years and met my husband. Although I became burned out and disliked the job by the end, it was incredibly formative and gave me the confidence to return to college and earn a degree in the medical field, where I now work. Story 53. I'm taking a risk right now, and I haven't gotten over it yet, but I hope I can say, I'm glad I did in the future. Story 54. Leaving a toxic job without any employment lined up was challenging. However, I received a call on the day I left with a job offer. I also left the United Kingdom to travel to New Zealand, where I met my amazing partner. Now, we live together in Australia. Story 55. I made a girl pregnant 10 years ago with no intention of being in a relationship. She told me a doctor concluded that she couldn't have children, and I, being over 20, believed that. Initially, I considered not being part of the child's life, but after reflecting on my own absent alcoholic father, I decided I would ensure my child was loved. We have had a beautiful relationship all these years, something I never had with my father. Story 56. I left a well-paying job in my home country to train as a teaching English as a foreign language teacher. I felt alone, lost, and disheartened, but I still had a house, a good job, and financial stability. Everyone told me I was fortunate and urged me to persevere, but I chose to take a risk. During the training, I met a girl who is now my wife, and I have never looked back. Story 57. I met up with a girl I had been talking to for 2 weeks. She lived 300 miles away, halfway between us, in a place I had never been. I did not tell anyone where I was going, who I was meeting, or why, and I drove her to Seattle for our date. I was 19 at the time. Story 58. Accepting a job in another country was a significant decision for me. I had recently become a father, and we were struggling financially. I was offered a job abroad that paid well, but I had to go alone initially to ensure I could secure our future and that the conditions were suitable for saving money, renting an apartment, and eventually bringing my wife and child. This was necessary to have enough funds to support them in the first few months while she searched for a job. Fast forward 8 years. We bought an apartment 2 years ago and couldn't be happier. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt I experienced during that time were profound. I am grateful that everything worked out. Story 59. Having my daughter changed everything for me. I hadn't known her father long and never planned to have children. I didn't think I was cut out to be a mother. Although things didn't work out between us, that hasn't stopped my daughter and me from living our best lives. I would say I turned out to be a pretty great mom. Story 60. Jumping out of an airplane. Back in the day, I was part of a morning radio show, and we did a segment where we each had to face our fears. Mine was heights. I get wobbly even standing on the second step of a ladder, so I boldly said that I'd go skydiving. I figured it wouldn't go anywhere, but a few minutes later, a skydiving school called in and said they'd be more than happy to throw me out of a perfectly good airplane. They called my bluff, and since it was live on the air, I had to follow through. A short time later, I was in a plane 9,500 feet in the air and strapped to a man named Bubba for a tandem skydive. It was amazing. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I wasn't really afraid of flying, but I could never get fully relaxed on a commercial flight before then. The next time I was on a plane after skydiving, I slept like a baby. Story 61. Asking out a friend. I was turned down, but thank goodness. It would have weighed on my mind and poisoned the friendship if I hadn't expressed my feelings and received an answer. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.